Welcome to the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I'm your host, Lyndsay Dowd. My goal is to help train leaders and sales organizations how to manage and deliver results with empathy, compassion, and kindness. Let's get started. Welcome to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I've got a fun guest today. How do you go from an undercover prostitute to empowerment speaker and trainer for leaders? After a debilitating accident that forced Diane Halfman to slow down, it led her to find her grit. She had to shed her undercover persona both in work and in life, and through a series of terrible experiences, she discovered her true power. Diane is a consultant, speaker, podcaster, trainer, and coach dedicated to helping people access everything they already have within themselves. Diane formed her own company called SPAlife. SPA stands for Seek Power Always. She has a master's degree in HR management and a certification as a life coach. Diane Halfman, welcome to the show.
Lyndsay, so great to be here. Always good to chat with you.
Oh, thanks for being on. So, I gave a teaser. You have a pretty incredible story, and I would love you to share some of that with us.
Well, yeah, I grew up not hoping or dreaming about being a police officer. I actually went to school to be an attorney, and when my senior year, I just decided that wasn't for me. Especially if anyone knows anything about doing research, it just seemed stifling for what I wanted to do. And I had some senior classmates that were going into law enforcement, and they're like, why don't you take the test, see what happens? And literally from taking the test, 3 months later, I was on the team. And so, there was a big unfolding of that because I grew up, pretty sheltered, 12 years Catholic school. I really didn't know much about police work and, learned a lot through the academy, but really on the street is where you learn, some really deep skills, and you really get to see, I've been in thousands of homes and got to see the behind the scenes that people don't see of how people live their life and what that actually looks like. So I got to both wear the uniform and be the 911 responder of every craziness you can think of. And then also working undercover as a prostitute, hunting a serial killer and really understanding what is behind prostitution and, really seeing how doing those kind of details really helps us solve a lot of deep crime. So all of those kind of things really gave me a behind the scenes of being able to trust myself, to really not second guess myself, to be able to make quick decisions, all things that translated into the private sector of skills we all need.
Gosh, there's so much you said in there. And one of the themes that I got through all of my research on you is you really rely on your instincts heavily. And that comes into play in everything you do. So going back to just when you become a police officer and somebody had to say to you, okay, you're going to go undercover as a prostitute and go hunt a serial killer, like there had to be some serious leadership in there to make you want to follow this. I know it's part of the job, but can you talk through some of that thought process?
Right. Well, I was the only woman on my squad back then. There wasn't a lot of that. And so, when it's kind of like eeny, meeny, miny, you're going.
Yeah, that's it.
I think there's a lot of, I think sometimes people think like, oh, I'm going to cultivate to be a leader. I'm going to study to be a leader. But I think there's so many different times where we're put in leadership positions and, we take the hand that we're dealt and we really start building upon that. And I think having actual experience in situations and being able, one of the things that was great about the police department is we always did Monday night, quarterbacking, right? Of being able to look at what worked, what didn't work. But in the situation, I think this is important for a leader is when you're in it, you got to stick with what's in front of you and move forward. That's not the time to evaluate or to hesitate or any of those kind of things. You want to be able to do all of those things before you get in those situations and after, but in it, you've got to keep moving forward.
Wow, that's brilliant. So you were acting as an undercover cop or as the prostitute, and you had a pretty bad accident and you had to step back. Can you take us through that part of your story?
Yeah, that part happened. So I did several different kinds of undercover assignments. And at that particular time, our team was riding mountain bikes. And so the reason why we were doing that is because criminals and suspects and all these people, they know the sound of a police car. Like anyone
Right.
who's been on the street, they know that. So we started using bicycles to be able to ride up on people to be able to catch them at the element of surprise. And at that time, I was working a detail where we were doing 10851s, which are stolen vehicles. So
Mm.
we would roll up to an area and in the process of stealing them. And so in that work, I was on the mountain bike and going downhill, hit a pothole, went over the top, put my hand out, shattered, all the bones in my gun hand, my right hand,
Oh,
and was taken into emergency surgery, had 7 hours of surgery there. And I had an external fixator on my hand to put it back together. I mean, all of the things that, you think about with that. And they had to actually snap my hand back. I mean, there's, all those craziness. The bottom line is that I had amazing physical therapy, and I still have, I have good use of the hand, but I have a 33% chance of paralysis if I broke
mm.
it again, and was told I couldn't get into more street fights or any type of heavily physical activities. And so it was too much of a liability for the city. So I was retired.
Oh, wow. So you had to make a pivot. Then
Yes.
what?
So then, I actually, my final case was where, as I was going through retirement, I was the liaison between myself and the police department for a friend of mine whose 7-year-old daughter was kidnapped and subsequently killed.
Ugh.
And so, that was a year long of, going through trials and him being convicted and just, really taking stock of my life and how I wanted to live it. Both my daughters were still relatively young at the time. And, you in police work in general, but in that case in particular, you see how short life is, and really taking stock of, the impact you want to have and what that actually looks like. So, from that, I really wanted to spend more time with my daughters. I was going through getting my master's degree, and one of the things I used to do when I had my days off in the police department, it was I would help people organize their life, both physically, mentally, all of that, because that helped me, because my day-to-day work was so chaotic, right? There was so much chaos, and every call we get is something, tragic, right? Something that one of those things would be, challenging for people. And so for me, being able to organize my life and helping other people gave me a sense of calm and peace in my
Mm.
space. So in transitioning, I was helping people with that and in their space, and how to mentally just approach, because one of the things, because I've been in so many homes, is that I coined a term called the clutter to drama ratio. And what that means is the more clutter in your life, right, the more drama you have. And I found that when calls that I would go on, when people's spaces were chaotic, the police came to their home more. There was a lot going on. There were things happening. And, so I found the reverse was true too, is when you create a calm space in your home, you deal with chaos and you deal with challenging things much better, because, that clear mind, clear spirit, calm space, they all are very interrelated.
Mm. So somehow you found your way to a master's in HR. What inspired that? And I mean, did you actually get to work in HR for a company?
I didn't. One of the things is one of the benefits I got from the police work is that when you retire because of an injury, you have the opportunity to be retrained. And
Mm.
so, I'm kind of a consummate student. My undergraduate degree, my bachelor's was criminal justice, which was, very helpful with the work that I did. But one of the things I liked about HR, and I really just enjoyed the classes with it, is again, systems, right? Systems and structures are so important, and being able to see how to communicate, how to relate to other people. I would say that I utilize skills from that, in my work with people now in consulting training. I utilize that because I found that the most challenging thing that most companies have is communication,
Mm.
right? And there is an amazing thing about when people think they heard one thing from someone, right? It's the telephone game. It's like, when you tell someone, did they hear what you say? Did they have the intention behind it? And what did that actually look like? So being able to look at a situation, and it really helped, as a police officer as well, is that you're always hearing conversations, you're always in communication, there's a lot of things going on with that. So I was able to really pull the two things together between my work and also my degree to be able to look at how important communication skills are.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I talk about this a lot with leadership, and the words you choose and the way you communicate to your people can really either inspire people or do the complete opposite. And I focus a lot on leadership style, and I think it's really important that people choose the right words and the right way to get the best out of their folks. So you founded My SPAlife. Talk about that, because it sounds like a spa, but what really is it?
You know, it's all of that actually. You know, it's when I had completed that case of the kidnapping murder, there was someone that donated for the mother of the child, myself, and someone else to go to a place called Canyon Ranch in
Yeah.
Tucson. And I had never been to a place like this
Oh,
before.
beautiful.
And it was so amazing I mean, think about how we basically dragged ourselves to this place after a year of just sadness and tragedy and being in the media and just so much that was around that case,
Mm.
that when we stepped foot at Canyon Ranch and was able to just, the beauty alone was just breathtaking, and walking through the property with the waterfalls and the art and being able to have healthy food and, you know, activities and body work and hiking, just all of those things. And there was just, I felt like every day it was more like, you know, getting a part of our soul back. And
Oh.
being able to have moments like that allowed us in the evenings to have some really deep conversations about, you know, the mother, Brenda. She talked about, I want to have meaning to the loss of my daughter, and really got involved in helping change legislation about when children are taken, and some of those processes. And we had some really beautiful conversations around that. And when I came back to that, I talked to my coach, and he asked me if I could do anything in the world, you know, regardless of time, pay, and all of that, what would it be? And I said I would live the spa life. And I had never said that word before. And I was clear that it wasn't just about having a massage. It was more about a lifestyle. It was about, when you take care of every aspect of yourself, you show up as the best version of yourself. And the things that can come out of that are so profound. And so as part of the evolution of the word, it came to create the acronym of it, of seek power always. And no matter different times in my life, and I've seen this with myself as well as with my clients, is, you know, we can be going along the way and things happen, you know, whether it's tragic, whether it's our kids, whether it's, you know, our life. I mean, it's, you know, shutdowns in the world. I mean, we're all faced with things that
Right.
happen, and how we approach those and how we look at those things are really a direct relationship of uh, how we see ourselves, and how we look at, we are not, I look at it as, we're not of this world, right? We are a spiritual being. And I look at, when you talk about seeking power, a lot of times people have the association of power as the misuse of power and being something not good with it. But if you look at the power that you have, and it not being something outside of yourself, that you are that power within you, that's where you can trust your intuition. That's where you get clear on what your values are. That's where you sit, where your boundaries are. And when you lead from that place, when you live from that place, that is part of living that spa life. And it's a very powerful position to be in as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a parent, when you approach from that perspective.
Oh, I love all of that. So, Diane, who are the kinds of people that hire you?
Entrepreneurs and corporations, typically leaders who are really good about making those decisions, but behind the scene, where their team doesn't see them, they second guess those decisions. They, you know, they get in that position where, you know, how could I have made something different? And that, not being able to make those decisions quickly, and not forgetting maybe what the foundation of their business is, or why they make the certain decisions they are. I help them kind of look back on that, and to actually stand confidently in those decisions and trust that they are really leading from that perspective. And as their businesses change, as their life changes, you know, a lot of times they don't like to share within their business culture things that are happening privately. And I think we're seeing a lot more intermeshing between, what happens in your home life, how it affects your personal life. And I help people bring those things together so that they get really clear on who they are, so that when they start doing that leadership from the top down, that they come from that clear space.
Oh, I love that you just said that. And that's something that I talk to my clients about with regard to LinkedIn. And you and I had this conversation that, LinkedIn is no longer just this online resume. You show up with your whole self. And while I don't recommend everybody start posting like it's Facebook, you certainly can add elements of your personality and things that you're passionate about because it's you. And just like you are not your role at a company, you are so much more than that. I love when people can show up and be themselves. And authenticity and vulnerability are huge topics right now. I'm seeing it not just in the news, I'm seeing it on LinkedIn. I'm seeing like a real paradigm shift. And I don't know if you're seeing it too. I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's when you start adding the unique aspects of yourself, those are the things that people are drawn to. That's what they see that your life experience things are. I mean, when I first retired from the police department, I didn't really tell many people, unless they already knew, that I was a police officer. I just wanted to break from just the stress of it,
Sure.
the responsibility of it, all of that. But then I had people who were, once they found out about it, they'd always ask me about the stories, particularly about the undercover. And then I really started to realize, and people were pointing out, that the skill set that I created in that work is no one else has that exact skill set that I have. Right. And so by sharing that, and people are like, okay, you've been in some of the most stressful situations in the world, to look at somebody else's life and to be able to help them make those decisions and lock arms together with that. People trust me for that, right? They rely on that experience for that. It's the same thing with you. It's like people look at what's unique about Lyndsay. What is it about it? And when they hear some of that, they're like, that's my person, right?
Yeah.
And so by sharing some of those things, people can much more easily decide like, hey, I need to work with that person, or I need to have them in my life because of their experience, because of those unique things. And the more people share those, the more that, one, they see you're a real person, and
Yeah.
two, they want to utilize that experience to help them get a leg up on whatever it is that they're dealing with.
Well, and I love that you put power to your story. And I was just talking with a client today, and you wanted to distance yourself from the police work and your experience with that, but then you came to realize how valuable that skill set was. And for me, I got fired, and I never thought in a million years I was ever going to get fired. It wasn't part of my career plan for myself. And at first there was incredible shame and embarrassment. And I started to find power in my story. And as I told my story, I mean, one could argue, yes, I did many things wrong, but I also learned a lot from it. And I
Right.
used that fire to start my company. And that became part of my narrative. And though it's not pretty, and neither was your accident or the poor loss of your friend's child, like those are terrible, terrible things.
Right.
But that experience helps shape you for who you are and what you bring to the table.
Absolutely. Well, I love hearing about, the journey that people have. And actually, I respected you at an even higher level when I heard that you got fired, because what that means is that you got back up,
Yeah.
right? That you utilize that experience. And so many times people get stopped, when they're in a down cycle or things aren't working out, and things can happen, right? And so when we all question different aspects of where we're at, but when we can take that and keep moving forward and actually utilize that to move forward, that is where the resilience, the grit, the determination, that's the person you want to have in your back corner, because they know how to get through and navigate through challenging times. I mean, we're seeing now people are, depression and
Yeah.
fear, and haven't really, gotten back to their new normal of what they're going to be in the world. I mean, we can really help people to do that, because life is really short. You don't want to live in a place of fear and not knowing. You got to find the people that can help you get through those hard times so that you can start shining.
I agree. And that is one thing that all of the guests on this podcast series have in common. And that's a story of resilience. And my message to our listeners is, no matter how bad, whatever it is you're going through or something that you went through, you have the ability to get back up. You have the opportunity and the power in whatever it was that happened to you, to learn from it and to help others. And it really helps you tell your story. So I love that. I love that you talk about that. I think that's brilliant. So when I think of the work that you did, and culture is a really big thing that I talk a lot about. And, when you were a part of the team and the leadership that you worked with, how important was culture then? You had to do some pretty difficult things. So what was that like?
I think I experienced, as most people in whatever their job is that the spectrum of that, when the culture was good and when the
Yeah.
culture was challenging, right? And so I think what's really important is to find out who's in your corner, who can you look to, who can you run the answers through, who can you have, and in police work, who has your back is like huge, right? Because you're in
Right.
life, in death situations. Most people don't get shot at their job, right? And so when you have that happen a couple times, you pay attention at a whole different level. And so for me, I was really grateful to my primary squad that I had, because a lot of the guys on the team were previous military, and so there was academy training, and then they were like, now we're going to teach you in the street training, right? And so I really got to have multiple layers of instructors and people that would show me the ropes and be able to look at things as well. Now, on the flip side, I also, again, being not many women in law enforcement, had some challenges in that, in terms of, it's hard to kind of explain it now, because I actually had a lieutenant of mine call me into the office and said, I've been getting several sexual harassment complaints, on your behalf, and I want to know why you didn't come in yourself. And there were like 300
I'm
of
the
them.
only woman.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
And I was just like, I actually laughed, and I just said, I look at harassment is that it's like, for me, it's how I orientate myself to this. And I look at this in life in general, in that, in order, I know that, and I know things have changed over time. However, when you see death and things happen to children, and you see very tragic things, you've got to come up with some coping skills. And a lot of times, off-color jokes and humor is a way of doing that. And I always kept it in perspective that it wasn't personal. I didn't take it personally. And I looked at it as, whatever we can all do to, get through the day and to make a difference in the life, that was the more important thing to do, and the more thing to look at. Now, that's not to say if, someone has some things that, it personally hits them, and I always looked at it as, if somebody said something that didn't work for me, I said something about it. Like I headed off at the pass to say something around that. And so I always felt, for me, it was better to handle that. And I think that also led to how I can be empathetic towards other people, and how I can have better conversations. Or, I always looked at it as, what was it? I think sometimes if you can put yourself in other people's shoes and go, okay, where did that comment come from, and where did it go, and what happened with it? And, I think that a lot of times there's an element of fear, right? That is behind, if you look at just thinking, like, if no matter what somebody says to you, if you look at what are they afraid of, right? And it's a very interesting perspective, and it applies to almost anything, because if you look at what's the fear behind that, I always looked at, there was probably a call earlier the day where, they almost got shot, something happened, like, some major things. And it was that nervous energy that they deflected out of there. And I think that it's one of the ways, I think so many times now people like jump on this bandwagon of like, oh, poor me, or this happened, or, it's like this, it's just
Very
interesting, just
reactive.
very reactive, and any conflict and all of these kind of things. And it's like, I think that we can really build upon ourselves as a culture and a people, is to look at what's behind that, right? And I think so many times how we respond to something really makes a huge difference in the outcome of that, right? And so we can, this is where the communication part comes in. If you even ask a question like, where are you coming from with that, right? It helps.
Is that what you mean by inner wisdom? I know that's something you talk a lot about.
Yeah, definitely inner wisdom is part of that for sure. And I think that for me, when you know what your values are, you know what you stand for, you know what your purpose is, like when you get really clear on what kind of impact you want to have on other people, then when things come up, you can take that extra breath and check in with yourself, right? Because when all those things are in alignment with yourself and you're speaking from truth and you're speaking from that wisdom of yourself, I believe that that's where, I don't think it's coincidental that we have this inspiration within ourselves, that we have these ideas, right? And a lot of times it happens when they're in the shower or they're driving, or these moments, and these great things come up, right? That's part of our wisdom. It's when we dismiss them, we don't get to actually tap into that and have that happen. So I believe that anything that happens outside of ourselves, we can really run it through our wisdom and actually have a deeper conversation with someone about what that is about. And a lot of times, we think it's about us. And almost every time something comes up, whether I received a comment or something happened, it had nothing to do with me or what was going
Yep.
on. It was about what was going on in their life and what was happening. So if we take a minute, take that deep breath and trust, hey, you know what? Something's going on with this person, right? And come from that place,
Yep.
then we can actually have some great conversations around that. And that's also what helps be, a good team leader, being in a culture where people are actually willing to have a real conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important because I remind my kids this all the time. You choose how you react to something. I can't make you feel something. You feel something as a result of something that's going on within you. It could be by words that I said, or it could be somebody else who said something to you, but how you react is up to you. So I love that. Take a breath. Let's think about it before we respond. That's great. So what is one tool that allows you to design your own life?
Your calendar. It is absolutely something that I think people really overlook, because if you take a glance at your calendar, whether you look at the day, the week, the month, whatever you have on there is what you've chosen to be your priorities and your life. And a
Mm,
lot of times people will look at their calendar and they'll say, well, I have to do this and I have to do that. If you take that moment and you look at, you actually don't have to do anything. You get to do the things that you choose to do in
yeah.
your life and the connections you have. If you say, like, family is important to me, but your family is not on your calendar or you're not spending time with them, how much of a
Yeah.
priority is that to you? So I think the number one tool that people have is take back your calendar, put things on there that really are part of your passion. It's part of why you're here. It actually encompasses the values of those things, because, one thing I've learned definitely through police work is life is really, really short. And to live from that place of, well, as soon as the kids graduate, as soon as I get this next client, as soon as, you're going to miss your life. And so
Oh,
you
it's
really
so
have to
true.
make sure you put those things in your calendar that are truly important to you.
Yeah, my guest just that she just aired last week. Sarah Davenport had said you have to realize you only have 18 summers with your kids, and when you think of it that way, time
Yeah,
goes really fast. I mean, my kids are
absolutely.
14, so I've just only got a few left where they're still under my care, and that is fleeting. So you got to hang on to those moments. So, what is something that inspires you, or what inspires you?
My grandkids.
Mm,
I would say definitely my grandkids, because, when I worked, especially when I worked undercover and my children were really young, they spent a lot of times with my parents, because I was a single parent at that time. And so I feel that even though I was there for the big things, there's a lot of those day to day things that as a working mom, I felt like I
yes.
wasn't as much a part of. And so for me, really spending that time with the kids, I mean, I do a lot of traveling with my work, but I always make sure, and this is part of that calendar, is anything that is important, whether it's one of their sports things or something personally or whatever that's important to them, I will be here for that.
Oh, it's so good. And what is the legacy you would like to leave?
My legacy, for myself, my client, my family, all of those kind of things, is that you live your one true life, right? That we only have that one that we have. Get really clear on what your purpose is and what it is that you're to do, and do it.
Mm, love that. I love that. Diane, how do people find you?
Well, they can go to dianehalfman.com, my website. Everything kind of branches off from there. You can get links to my podcast that I have as well, Live Your Spa Life, to get inspirational conversations like this one. And you are a guest on there as well,
Yes.
so they can see us again, right? In there. So, and I'm building LinkedIn because of you, so you can find me there as well. So any of the social ways.
And we'll share all of that.
That would be good.
You guys definitely check out Diane. She is fantastic. And what a story. What a life. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. You've been a fabulous guest.
Thank you, Lyndsay. So wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for all you do.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to Heartbeat for Hire. If you like what you hear, I'd love it if you'd subscribe and leave a 5-star review. To keep the conversation going, you can find me on Insta or at LinkedIn at Lyndsay Dowd, H4H, or you can reach me at my website, heartbeatforhire.com. Thanks so much. Have a great day.